Take a deep breath. Now imagine diving straight down into the ocean, past the waves, past the sunlight, down through the dark blue waters where almost nothing has ever been explored. Now imagine encountering a creature that no human has ever seen. It's very likely that you do. In fact, if you could somehow meet every species living in the ocean, only about 9% of them would be known to science. The other 91% would be completely undiscovered. And that claim appears everywhere. Scientific papers, documentaries, even textbooks. But when you first hear it, the obvious question is, how could anyone possibly know that? How can scientists estimate animals that have never been discovered? It sounds almost impossible, but the answer turns out to involve one of the oldest concepts in biology, the tree of life itself, and some math. For more than 250 years, biologists have been cataloging organisms using a system created by Swedish naturalist Carl Linné. Every species is placed into a hierarchy of increasingly larger groups. Species belong to genera, genera belong to families, families belong to orders, orders belong to classes, and classes belong to enormous groups called phyla. This structure is what biologists call the tree of life, and for centuries it was simply used to organize the vast knowledge of the natural world. Until scientists noticed something strange. When they looked at how discoveries had accumulated over time, they realized that discoveries weren't happening evenly across the tree of life. Take a look at these graphs depicting discoveries over time. Notice how the discovery of new higher taxonomic groups is steadily coming to a halt in the 21st century. You can tell by the lines starting to flatten out, with a trajectory towards a plateau. The graph for phyla, for example, seems to have already reached a plateau. Now compare that to the discovery of new species. That doesn't seem to be slowing down anytime soon. This tells us that most higher taxonomic groups, aka the bigger branches of the tree of life, were discovered decades or even centuries ago. And we probably won't find many new ones in the future. So we can assume we have, or at the very least, are close to having the true total number of groups for the higher taxonomic levels. But species? Tons of species are still being described every single year, and we will continue to do so for years to come. And that realization led to a surprisingly clever idea in which you can estimate the true number of species living in the ocean, hiding in the wicked depths below. To really nail down this concept, let me give you an analogy. Imagine you're standing under a gigantic tree in a forest. The canopy is so dense that you can't possibly count every leaf. But you can see the trunk, you can see the main branches, you can see how those branches split into smaller branches. If you understand how trees grow, you might still be able to estimate how many leaves the tree has. Not by counting leaves directly, but by studying the branching pattern. Scientists realized that biodiversity might work exactly the same way, where the higher taxonomic groups are the tree's branches, which we have mostly already counted. And the lower taxonomic groups, like species, are the leaves hanging from those branches. But even at higher taxonomic levels, some groups may still be undiscovered. So they first used a technique called discovery curves to estimate the true total number of groups at each taxonomic level. In the simplest of terms, they used statistical models to extend the curves based on their trajectory until they reached a plateau. The value where the curves hit a plateau was considered to be the true total number of groups for that taxonomic level. Using this method on data from the Global Marine Species Database, World Register of Marine Species. This allowed them to know how many phyla exist, how many classes belong to those phyla, how many orders belong to those classes, how many families belong to those orders, and how many genera belong to those families. Approximately. And when they plotted those numbers on a graph, something remarkable happened. The number of groups increased in a smooth mathematical pattern as you moved down the hierarchy. Each level contained far more groups than the level above it, and the increase followed a predictable curve. Once that curve was established, researchers could extend it one step further with the power of math, from genera down to species. Their conclusion was striking. They estimated that the ocean may contain about 2.2 million species of complex marine life. We're talking animals, plants, fungi, protists, and chromists. We're not talking about bacteria, archaea, or viruses. Only eukaryotic organisms were included in this study. At the time the paper came out in 2011, we had formally described 194,000 marine species. Nowadays, it's closer to 250,000, still nowhere near the 2.2 million estimated by the statistical model. This is where the claim 91% of species in the ocean are undiscovered comes from. Of course, estimates like these are never perfect. The method relies on assumptions about biodiversity, taxonomy, and how they're organized. But when researchers tested the same modeling approach on groups where the number of species is already known, like birds and mammals, the predictions turned out to be surprisingly accurate, which suggests the model is capturing something real about the structure of life on Earth. And if that's true, then the ocean is far more mysterious than we usually imagine. Because somewhere out there, in the vast unexplored depths of our blue planet, there are likely millions of species that have never been named, never been studied, and never been seen by human eyes. The age of discovery didn't end centuries ago. In many ways, it might have only just begun. So the next time someone tells you that 91% of species in the ocean are undiscovered, you now know the strange and fascinating reasoning behind that number. Thank you for watching. If you like this video and want to become part of a community that deeply understands the ocean and appreciates it, consider subscribing. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, let's do this. Please.